Taste the love that's in the black. Pages breathe when you're not there. Turn the key, the shadows talk back. Midnight rings you if you're dead. One more line, one more flight into the weird unknown. SL tonight, and the rainbows of Olive.
Good evening, and welcome to the Shadows. You're seated in a quiet study, far from the clamor of the world. The fire crackles low. A single lamp casts its golden pool across an open book. Tales carefully chosen. Tales that unsettled even the master of suspense himself. Outside, the rain taps against the window. Crows shift restlessly on the mantel. The chair beside the desk waits, empty, yet somehow expectant. This is Hitchcock's Tales That Terrify, Shadows from the Master, presented on SL tonight. Each week, we turn another page, step into another room where the ordinary tilts towards the uncanny, where fear wears its Sunday best and smiles politely before it strikes. Tonight, the shadows lengthen over a lonely Tennessee lake, and something watches from beneath the water. Settle in, turn the lights down low. The story is about to begin. Good evening, swamp dwellers of dread, and welcome to episode 12 of Hitchcock's Tales That Terrify, Shadows from the Master on SL tonight. Unearthing the Master's monstrous picks, merging his legacy with stories that stalked him. From iron traps, we wade into It by Theodore Sturgeon, a 1940 novella of primal horror from the anthology. In a remote swamp, farmer Alton Drew and his family encounter It, a mindless, mud-born abomination that kills indiscriminately, dissolving victims into its form. As son Corey and dog Kimbo track it, revelations tie It to decayed human remains, culminating into a brutal showdown. Sturgeon's vivid philosophical terror probes life's futility and monstrous rebirth. In 1959, Hitchcock thrilled with North by Northwest, starring Cary Grant as an ad man mistaken for a spy, fleeing across America in chases like the crop duster assault. Amid Cold War paranoia, it blended glamour with relentless pursuit. The spectacle era mirrors the story's unstoppable It. Brace for the bog. The story lurks. It walked in the woods. It was never born. It existed. Under the pine needles the fires burned, deep and smokeless in the mold. In heat and in darkness and decay there is growth. There is life and there is growth. It grew, but it was not alive. It walked unbreathing through the woods, and thought and saw and was hideous and strong. And it was not born, and it did not live. It grew and moved about without living. It crawled out of the darkness and hot damp mold into the cool of the morning. It was huge. It was lumped and crusted with its own hateful substances, and pieces of it dropped off as it went its way. Dropped off and lay writhing and stilled, and sank putrescent into forest alone. It had no mercy, no laughter, no beauty. It had strength and great intelligence, and perhaps could not be destroyed. It crawled out of its mound in the wood and lay pulsing in the sunlight for a long moment. Patches of it shone wetly in the golden glow. Parts of it were nubbled and flaked, and whose dead bones had given it the form of a man? It scrabbled painfully with its half-formed hands, beating the ground and the bole of a tree. It rolled and lifted itself up on its crumbling elbows, and it tore up a great handful of herbs and shredded them against its chest, and it paused and gazed at the gray-green juices with intelligent calm. It wavered to its feet and seized a young sapling and destroyed it, folding the slender trunk back on itself again and again, watching attentively the useless fibered splinters. And it snatched up a fear-frozen field creature, crushing it slowly, letting blood and pulpy flesh and fur ooze from between its fingers, run down and rot on the forearm. It began searching. Kimbo drifted through the tall grasses like a puff of dust. His bushy tail curled tightly over his back and his long jaws agape. He ran with an easy lope, loving his freedom and the power of his flanks and furry shoulders. His tongue lolled listlessly over his lips. His lips were black and serrated, and each tiny pointed liplet swayed with his doggy gallop. Kimbo was all dog, all healthy animal. He leapt high over a boulder and landed with a startled yelp as a long-eared coney shot from its hiding place under the rock. Kimbo hurtled after it, grunting with each great thrust of his legs. The rabbit bounced just ahead of him, keeping its distance, its ears flattened on its curving back and its little legs nibbling away at distance hungrily. It stopped, and Kimbo pounced, and the rabbit shot away at a tangent and popped into a hollow log. Kimbo yelped again and rushed shuffling at the log, knowing his failure, curveted once around the stump and ran on into the forest. The thing that watched from the wood raised its crusted arms and waited for Kimbo. Kimbo sensed it there, standing dead still by the path. To him, it was a bulk which smelled of carrion, not fit for Roland, and he snuffled distastefully and ran to pass it. The thing let him come abreast and dropped a heavy twisted fist on him. Kimbo saw it coming and curled up tight as he ran, and the hand clipped stunnily on his rump, sending him rolling and yiping down the slope. Kimbo straddled to his feet, shook his head, shook his body with a deep growl, came back to the silent thing with green murder in his eyes. He walked stiffly, straight-legged, his tail as low as his lowered head and ruff of fury around his neck. The thing raised its arm again, waited. Kimbo slowed, and flipped himself through the air at the monster's throat. His jaws closed on it, his teeth clicking together through a mass of filth, and he fell choking and snarling at its feet. The thing leaned down and struck twice, and after the dog's back was broken, it sat beside him and began to tear him apart. "Be back in an hour or so," said Alton Drew, picking up his rifle from the corner behind the wood box. His brother laughed. "Old Kimbo about runs your life, Alton," he said. "Oh, I know the old devil," said Alton. "When I whistle for him for half an hour and he don't show up, he's in a jam or he treed something worth shooting at. The old sun gun calls me by not answering." Corey Drew shoved a full glass of milk over to his 9-year-old daughter and smiled. "You think as much of that hound dog is yours as I do of Babe here." Babe slid off her chair and ran to her uncle. "Gonna catch me a bad fellow, Uncle Alton?" She shrilled. The bad fellow was Corey's invention. The one who lurked in corners ready to pounce on little girls who chased the chickens and played round mowing machines and hurled green apples with powerful young arms at the sides of the hogs. To hear the synchronized thud and grunt, little girls who swore with an Austrian accent like a ex-hired man that they had, who dug caves and haystacks till they tipped over, and kept pet crawfish in tomorrow's milk cans, and rode work horses to a lather in the night pasture. "Get back here and keep away from your Uncle Alton's gun," said Corey. "If you see the bad fellow, Alton, chase him back here. He has a date with Babe here for that stunt hers last night." The preceding evening, Babe had kind-heartedly poured pepper on the cow's salt block. "Don't worry, kiddo. grinned her uncle. I'll bring you the bad fellow's hide if you don't get me first. Alton Drew walked up the path towards the woods, thinking about Babe. She was a phenomenon, a pampered farm child. Ah, well, she had to be. They both loved Clissa Drew, and she'd married Corey, and they'd had loved Clissa's child. Funny thing was, Alton was a man's man and thought things out that way, and his reaction to love was a strong and frightened one. He knew what love was because he felt it still for his brother's wife and would feel it as long as he lived for Babe. It led him through his life, and yet he embarrassed himself by thinking of it. Loving a dog was an easy thing, because you and the old devil could love one another completely without talking about it. The smell of gun smoke and wet fur in the rain was perfume enough for Alton Drew, a grunt of satisfaction, and the scream of something hunted and hit was poetry enough. They weren't like love for a human, that choked his throat so he couldn't say words and not thought of anyway. So Alton loved his dog Kimbo and his Winchester for all to see, and let his love for his brother's woman, Clissa and Babe, eat at him quietly and unmentioned. His quick eyes saw the fresh indentations in the soft earth behind the boulder, which showed where Kimbo had turned and leapt with a single surge chasing the rabbit. Ignoring the tracks, he looked for the nearest place where a rabbit might hide, and strolled over to the stump. Kimbo had been there, he saw, and he had been there too late. "You're an old fool," muttered Alton. "Well, I can't catch a coney by chasing it. You want to cross him up some way." He gave a peculiar trilling whistle, sure that Kimbo was digging frantically under some nearby stump for a rabbit that was 3 counties away by now. No answer. A little puzzled, Alton went back to the path. "He never done this before," he said softly. He cocked his 32-40 and cradled it. At the county forest, someone had once said of Alton Drew that he could shoot a handful of corn and peas thrown in the air and hit only the corn. Once he split a bullet on the blade of a knife and put 2 candles out. He had no need to fear anything could be shot at. That's what he believed. The thing in the woods looked curiously down at what it had done to Kimbo, and tried to moan the way Kimbo had before it had died. It stood a minute, storing away its facts in its foul, unemotional mind. Blood was warm. Sunlight was warm. Things that moved and bore fur had a muscle to force thick liquid through its tiny tubes in the body. The liquid coagulated for it after a time. The liquid on rooted green things was thinner, and the loss of a limb did not mean loss of life. It was very interesting, but the thing, the mold with the mind, was not pleased. Neither was it displeased. Its accidental urge was a thirst for knowledge, and it was only interested. It was growing late, and the sun reddened and rested a while on the hilly horizon, teaching the clouds to be inverted flames. The thing threw up its head suddenly, noticing the dusk. Night was ever a strange thing, even for those of us who have known it in life. It would have been frightening for the monster had it been capable of fright, but it could only be curious, it could only reason from what it had observed. What was happening? It was getting harder to see. Why? It threw its shapeless head from side to side. It was true, things were dim and growing dimmer. Things were changing shape, taking on a new and darker color. What did the creatures it had crushed and torn apart see? How did they see? The larger one, the one that had attacked, had used 2 organs in its head. That must have been it, because after the thing had torn off 2 of the dog's legs, it had struck at the hairy muzzle, and the dog, seeing the blow coming, had dropped folds of skin over the organs close to its eyes. Ergo, the dog saw with its eyes. But then, after the dog was dead, its body still, repeated blows had had no effect on the eyes. They remained open and staring. The logical conclusion was, then, that a being had ceased to live and breathe and move about, lost the use of its eyes. It must be that to lose sight was conversely to die. Dead things did not walk about, they lay down and did not move. Therefore, the thing in the woods concluded that it must be dead, and so it lay down by the path, not far away from Kimbo's scattered body, lay down and believed itself dead. Alton Drew came up through the dust of the wood. He was frankly worried. He whistled again and then called, and there was still no response. He said again, "The old fleabus never done this before," and shook his heavy head. It was past milking time and Corey would need him. "Kimbo!" he roared. The cry echoed through the shadows, and Alton flipped on the safety catch of his rifle and put the butt on the ground beside the path. Leaning on it, he took off his cap and scratched the back of his head wonderingly. The rifle butt sank into what he thought was soft earth. He staggered and stepped into the chest of the thing that lay beside the path. His foot went up to ankle in his yielding rottenness, and he swore and jumped back. Ooh, something sure dead as hell there. Ugh. He swabbed at his boot with a handful of leaves while the monster lay in the growing blackness with the edges of the deep footprint in its chest sliding into, filling it up. It lay there regarding him dimly out of its muddy eyes, thinking it was dead because of the darkness, watching the articulation of Alton Drew's joints, wondering at this new, uncautious creature. Alton cleaned the butt of his gun with more leaves and went on up the path, whistling anxious for Timbo. Clarissa Drew stood in the door of the milk shed, very lovely in red checked gingham and blue apron. Her hair was clean yellow, parted in the middle, and stretched tautly back to heavily braided knots. "Corey Alton!" she was called a little sharply. "Well?" Corey responded gruffly from the barn, where he was stripping off the ayrshire. The dwindling streams of milk popped pleasantly into the frothful pail. "I've called and called," said Clarissa. "Supper's cold, and Babe won't eat until you come. Why, where's Alton?" Corey grunted, heaved the stool out of the way, threw over the stanchion lock, and slapped the Ayrshire on the rump. The cow backed in the field like a towboat, clattered down the line and out into the barnyard. "Ain't back yet." "Not back?" Clarissa came in and stood beside him as he sat by the next cow, put his forehead against one flank. "But Corey, he said he'd—" Yeah, I know. He said he'd be back for the milking. I heard him. Well, he ain't. And you have to— Oh, Corey, I'll help you finish up. Alton would be back if he could. Maybe he's treed a blue jay," snapped her husband. "Him and that damn dog." He gestured hugely with one hand while the other went on milking. "I got 26 heads of cows to milk. I got pigs to feed and chickens to put to bed. I got to toss hay for the mare and turn the team out. I got harnessed men and a wire down in the night pasture. I got wood to split and carry." He mixed for a moment in silence, chewing on his lip. Lisa stood twisting her hands together, trying to think of something to stem the tide. It wasn't the first time Alton's hunting had interfered with the chores. "So I got to go ahead with it. I can't interfere with Alton's spoiling. Every damn time that hound of his smells out a squirrel, I go without my supper. I'm getting sick and—" "Oh, I'll help you," said Clarissa. She was thinking of the spring when Timbo had held 400 pounds of raging black bear at bay until Alton could put a bullet in its brain. The time Babe had found a bear cub and started to carry it home, and had fallen into a freshet, cutting her head. "Can't hate a dog that saved a child for you," she thought. "You'll do nothing of the kind," Corey growled. "Get back to the house. You'll find work enough there. I'll be along when I can. Damn it, Clarissa, don't cry. I didn't mean to—" "Oh, shucks." He got up and put his arms around her. "I'm wrought up. Go on now. I didn't no call to speak that way to you. I'm sorry. Go back to Babe. I'll put a stop to this for good tonight. I've had enough. There's work here for 4 farmers, and we got all me and that hunting. Go on now, Clarissa." "All right," she said to her shoulder. "But, Corey, hear him out first when he comes back. He might be unable to come back. He might be unable to come back this time. Maybe he... Ain't nothing can hurt my brother the bullet will hit. He can take care of himself. He's got no excuse good enough this time. Go on now, make the kid eat." Clarissa went back to the house, her young face pearled. Corey quarreled with Alton now and drove him away, what with the drought and the creamery about to close them all. They just couldn't manage. Hiring a man was out of the question. Corey'd have to work himself to death, and he just wouldn't be able to make it. No man could. She sighed and went into the house. It was 7 o'clock, and the milking's not done yet. Oh, why did Alton have to— Babe was in bed at 9 when Clarissa heard Corey in the shed, slinging the wire cutters into a corner. "Alton back yet?" They both said at once as Corey stepped into the kitchen, and as she shook her head, he clumped over to the stove and, lifting the lid, spat into the coals. "Come to bed," he said. She laid down her stitching and looked at his broad back. He was 28, and he walked and acted like a man 10 years older, and he looked like a man 5 years younger. "I'll be up in a while," Clarissa said. Corey glanced at the corner behind the wood box where Alton's rifle usually stood, then made an unspellable, disgusted sound and sat down to take off his heavy, mudded boots. "It's after 9, Clarissa volunteered timidly. Corey said nothing, reaching for the house slippers. "Corey, you're not gonna what?" "Oh, nothing. I just thought that maybe Alton. That dog goes hunting field mice. Alton goes hunting the dog. Now you want me to go hunting Alton? That's what you want? He was never this late before. I won't do it. Go out looking for him at 9 o'clock in the night? I'll be damned. He has no call to use us, so, Clissa. Clissa said nothing. She went to the stove, peered into the wash, boiler set aside at the back of the range. When she turned around, Corey had his shoes and coat on again. I knew you'd go, she said. Her voice smiled, though she did not. I'll be back during soon, and I don't reckon he's strayed far. It is late. I ain't feared for him, but he broke his 12-gauge shotgun, looked through the barrels, slipped 2 shells in his breech, and a box of them in his pocket. Don't wait up, he said over his shoulder as he went out. I won't, Clissa replied to the closed door, and went back to her stitching by the lamp. The path up the slope to the wood was very dark, and Corey went up, peering and calling. The air was chill and quiet, and the fetid odor of mold hung near it. Corey blew the taste of it out through the impatient nostrils, drew it in again with the next breath and swore. Nonsense, he muttered. Hound dog a-hunting at 10 in the damn night, too. Alton, he bellowed. Alton Daru! Echoes answered him, and he entered the wood. Huddled thing he passed in the dark heard him and felt the vibrations of his footsteps and did not move because he thought it was dead. Corey strode on, looking around and ahead and not down since his feet knew the path. Alton! That you, Corey? Corey Drew froze. The corner of the wood was thickly set and as dark as a burial vault. The voice he heard was choked, quiet, penetrating. Alton? I found Kimbo, Corey. Where the hell you been? Shouted Corey furiously. He disliked this pitch darkness. He was afraid at the tense hopelessness of Alton's voice, and he mistrusted his ability to stay angry at his brother. I called him, Corey. I whistled at him, and the old devil didn't answer. I can say the same for you, you louse. Why weren't you to milking? Where are you? You caught in a trap? Hound never missed answering before, you know, said the tight, monotone voice from the dark. Alton, what's the devil's the matter with you? What do I care if your mutt didn't answer? Where? I guess 'cause he didn't never died before, said Alton, refusing to be interrupted. You, what? Corey clicked his lips together twice and then said, Alton, you turned crazy. What's that you say? Kimbo's dead. Oh. Corey was seeing that picture again in his mind. Babe sprawled unconscious in the freshet, and Kimbo raging and snapping against the monster bear, holding her back until Alton could get there. What happened, Alton? He answered more quietly. I aimed to find out. Someone tore him up. Tore him up? There ain't a bit of him left tacked together, Corey. Every damn joint in his body's tore apart. Guts out of him. Good God. Bear, you reckon? No bear, nor nothing on 4 legs. He's all here. None of him's been et. Whoever done it just killed him. Tore him up. Good God, Corey said again. Who could have... There was a long silence. Then, come along home, he said almost gently. There's no call for you to set him up by all tonight. I'll set. I aim to be here at sun up, and I'm going to start tracking. And I'm going to keep tracking until I find the one that did this job on Kimbo. You're drunk or crazy, Alton. I ain't drunk. You can think what you like about the rest of it. I'm sticking here. We got farm back yonder, remember? I ain't gonna milk 26 head of cow again in the morning like I did just now, Alton. Somebody's got to. I can't be there. I guess you'll just have to, Corey. You dirty scum, Corey screamed. You come back with me now or I'll know why. Alton's voice was still tight, half sleepy. Don't you come no click nearer, bud. Corey kept moving towards Alton's voice. I said, the voice was very quiet now, stop where you are. Corey kept coming. A sharp click told of the release of 3240's safety. Corey stopped. You got your gun on me, Alton? Corey whispered. That's right, bud. You ain't chomping up these tracks for me. I need 'em at sunup. A full minute passed, and the only sound in the blackness was that of Corey's pained breathing. Finally, I got my gun too, Alton. Come home. You can't see to shoot me. We're even on that. We ain't. I know just where you stand, Corey. I've been here 4 hours. When gun scatters, my gun kills. Without another word, Corey Drew turned on his heel and stamped back to the farm. Black and liquidescent, it lay in the blackness. Not alive, not understanding death, believing itself dead. Things that were alive saw and moved about. Things that were not alive could do neither. It rested its muddy gaze on the line of the trees at the crest of the rise, and deep within its thoughts trickled wetly. They lay hold, dividing its newfound facts, dissecting them as it had dissected live things when they were light, comparing, concluding, pigeonholing. The trees at the top of the slope could just be seen, as their trunks were a fraction of a shade lighter than the dark sky behind them. At length they too disappeared, and for a moment sky and trees were a monotone. The thing knew it was dead now, and like many a being before it, it wondered how long it must stay like this. And then the sky beyond the trees grew a little lighter. That was a manifestly impossible occurrence, thought the thing, but it could see it, and it must be so. Did dead things live again? That was curious. What about dismembered dead things? It would wait and see. The sun came hand over hand up a beam. A bird somewhere made a high yawning peep, and as an owl killed a shrew, a skunk pounced on another, so that the night shift deaths and those of the day could go on without cessation. Two flowers nodded archly to each other, comparing their pretty clothes. A dragonfly nymph decided it was tired of looking serious, and cracked its back open to crawl out and dry gauzily. The first golden ray sheared down between the trees, through the grasses, passed over the mass and the shadowed bushes. I am alive again, thought the thing that could not possibly live. I am alive, for I see clearly. It stood up on its thick legs, up into the golden glow. In a little while, the wet flakes that had grown during the night dried in the sun, and when it took its first steps, they cracked off, and a small shower of them fell away. It walked up the slope to find Kimbo, to see if he, too, were alive again. Babe let the sun come into her room by opening her eyes. Uncle Alton was gone. That was the first thing that ran through her head. Dad had come home last night and had shouted at Mother for an hour. Alton was plumb crazy. He'd turned a gun on his own brother. If Alton never came 10 feet into Corey's land, Corey would fill him so full of holes he'd look like a tumbleweed. Alton was a lazy, shiftless, selfish, and one or two other things of questionable taste, but undoubted vividness. Babe knew her father. Uncle Alton would never be safe in this county. He bounced out of bed in the inevitable way of the very young and ran to the window. Corey was trudging down in the night pasture with two bridles over his arm to get the team. There were kitchen noises from downstairs. Babe ducked her head in the wash bowl and shook off the water like a terrier before she toweled. Trailing clean shirt and dungarees, she went to the head of the stairs and slid into the shirt and began her morning ritual with the trousers. One step down was a step through the right leg. One more, she was into the left. Then, bouncing step by step on both feet, buttoning one button per step, she reached the bottom fully dressed and ran into the kitchen. Didn't Uncle Alton come back at all, Mom? Morning, Babe. No, dear, because it was too quiet, smiling too much, Babe thought shrewdly. Wasn't happy. Where'd he go, Mom? We don't know, Babe. Sit down and eat your breakfast. What's a misbegotten, Mom? The Babe asked suddenly. Her mother nearly dropped the dish she was drying. Babe, you must never say that again. Oh, well, why is Uncle Alton then? Why is he what? Babe's mouth muscled around an outsized spoonful of oatmeal. Babe! All right, Mom, said Babe with a mouthful. Well, why? I told Corey not to shout last night, Crystal said half to herself. Well, whatever it means, he isn't, said Babe with finality. Did he go hunting again? He went to look for Kimbo, darling. Kimbo? Oh, Mummy, is Kimbo gone too? Didn't he come back either? No, dear. Oh, please, Babe. Please stop asking questions. All right. Where do you think they went? In the North Woods. Be quiet. Babe gulped away at her breakfast. An idea struck her. As she thought of it, she ate slower and slower, and cast more and more glances at her mother from under the lashes of her tilted eyes. It'd be awful if Daddy did anything to Uncle Alton. Someone ought to warn him. Babe was halfway to the woods when Alton's 3240 sent echoes giggling up and down the valley. Corey was in the south 30, riding a cultivator and cussing at the team of grays when he heard the gun. Ho! He called to the horses, and sat a moment to listen to the sound. 1, 2, 3, 4, he hunted. Saw someone, blasted away at him, had a chance to take aim and give him another. Careful, my God! He threw up the cultivator points and steered the team into the shade of 3 oaks. He hobbled into the gelding with swift sauces and spare trap, and headed for the woods. Alton, a killer, he murmured, and doubled back to the house for his gun. Pistol was standing just outside the door. Get shells! He snapped and flung into the house. Lissa followed him. He was strapping his hunting knife on before she could get a box off the shelf. Corey, hear that gun, did you? Alton's off his nut. He don't waste lead. He shot at someone just then, and he wasn't fixing to shoot partridges when I saw him last night. He was out to get a man. Give me my gun. Corey, babe, you keep her here. Oh God, this is a hell of a mess. I can't stand much more. Corey ran out the door. Lissa caught his arm. Corey, I'm trying to tell you, babe isn't here. I called and she isn't here. Corey's heavy, young, old face tautened. Babe, where did you last see her? Breakfast. Lissa was crying now. She say where she was going? No, she asked a lot of questions about Alton and where he'd gone. Did you say? Lissa's eyes widened and she nodded, biting the back of her hand. You shouldn't have done that, Lissa, he gritted, and ran towards the woods. Lissa looking after him, and in that moment she could have killed herself. Corey ran with his head up, straining with his legs and lungs and eyes at the long path. He puffed up the slope to the woods, agonizing for breath for the 45 minutes heavy going. He couldn't even notice the damp smell of mold in the air. He caught a movement in the thicket to his right and dropped. Struggling to keep his breath, he crept forward until he could see clearly. There was something in there, all right. Something black, keeping still. Corey relaxed his legs and torso completely to make it easier for his heart to pump some strength back into him, and slowly raised the 12 gauge until it bore on the thing hidden in the thicket. Come out, Corey said when he could speak. Nothing happened. Come out or by God I'll shoot, rasped Corey. There was a long moment of silence and his finger tightened on the trigger. You asked for it, he said, and as he fired, the thing leapt sideways into the open, screaming. It was a thin little man dressed in sepulchre black and bearing the rosiest baby face Corey had ever seen. The face was twisted with fright and pain. The man scrambled to his feet and hopped up and down, saying over and over, Oh, my hand! Don't shoot again! Oh, my hand! Don't shoot again! He stopped after a bit when Corey had climbed to his feet, and he regarded the farmer out of his sad, china blue eyes. You shot me, he said reproachfully, holding up a little bloody hand. Oh, my goodness! Corey said, Now, who the hell are you? The man immediately became hysterical, mouthing such a flood of broken sentences that Corey stepped back a pace and half raised his gun in self-defense. It seemed to constitute mostly of, I lost my papers and I didn't do it, and it was horrible, 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 and the dead man, and oh, don't shoot again. Corey tried twice to ask him a question, then he stepped over and knocked the man down. He lay on the ground, writhing and moaning and blubbering and putting his bloody hand to his mouth and where Corey had hit him. Now, what is going on around here? The man rolled over and sat up. I didn't do it. I didn't. I was walking along and I heard the gun and I heard someone swearing and an awful scream, and I went over there and peeped and I saw the dead man and I ran away and you came and I hid and you shot me and... Shut up! The man did as if a switch had been thrown. Now, said Corey, pointing along the path, you say there's a dead man up there? The man nodded and began crying in earnest. Corey helped him up. Follow this path back to my farmhouse. Tell my wife to fix up your hand. Don't tell her anything else. And wait there until I come. Here? Yes, thank you. Oh, thank you. Go on now. Corey gave him a gentle shove in the right direction, and went alone, in cold fear, up the path to the spot where he had found Alton the night before. He found him here now, too, and Kimbo. Kimbo and Alton had spent several years together in the deepest friendship. They had hunted and fought and slept together, and the lives they owed each other were finished now. They were dead together. It was terrible that they died the same way. Corey Drew was a strong man, but he gasped and fainted dead away when he saw what the thing of mold had done to his brother and his brother's dog. The little man in black hurried down the path, whimpering and holding his injured hand as if he wished he could limp with it. After a while, the whimper faded away, and the hurried stride changed to a walk as the gibbering terror of the last hour receded. He drew 2 deep breaths, said, My goodness, and fell almost normal. He bound a linen handkerchief around his wrist, but the hand kept bleeding. He tried the elbow, and that made it hurt, so he stuffed the handkerchief back in his pocket and simply waved the hand stupidly in the air until the blood spotted. He did not see the great moist horror that clumped along behind him, although his nostrils crinkled with its foulness. The monster had 3 holes close together on its chest, and 1 hole in the middle of its slimy forehead. It had 3 close-set pits in its back, and 1 on the back of its head. These marks were where Alton Drew's bullets had struck and passed through. Half the monster's shapeless face was sloughed away, and there was a deep indentation on its shoulder. This is what Alton Drew's gun butt had done after he clubbed it and struck at the thing that would not lie down after he put his 4 bullets through it. When this thing happened, the monster was not hurt or angry. It only wondered why Alton Drew acted that way. Now it followed the little man without hurrying at all, matching his stride step by step and dropping little particles of muck behind him. The little man went on out of the wood and stood with his back against a big tree at the forest edge, and he thought. Enough had happened to him here. What good would it do to stay and face a terrible murder inquest just to continue this silly vague search? There was supposed to be a ruin of an old hunting lodge deep in this woods somewhere, and perhaps it would hold the evidence he wanted. But it was a vague report, vague enough to be forgotten without regret. It'd be the height of foolishness to stay for all the Hicktown red tape that followed that ghastly affair back in the wood. Ergo, it would be ridiculous to follow that farmer's advice, to go to his house and wait for him. He'd go back to town. The monster was leaning against the other side of the big tree. The little man snuffled disgustingly at a sudden overpowering odor of rot. He reached for his handkerchief, fumbled, and dropped it. As he bent to pick it up, the monster's arm whoofed heavily in the air where his head had been, a blow that would have certainly removed that baby-faced putrescence. The man stood up and would have put the handkerchief to his nose had it not been so bloody. The creature behind the tree lifted its arm again just as the little man tossed the handkerchief away and stepped out into the field, heading across the country to the distant highway that would take him back to town. The monster pounced on the handkerchief, picked it up, studied it, tore it across several times, and inspected the tattered edges. Then it gazed vacantly at the disappearing figure of the little man, and finding him no longer interesting, turned back into the woods. Babe broke into a trot at the sound of the shots. It was important to warn Uncle Alton about what her father had said, but it was more interesting to find out what he had bagged. Oh, he bagged it all right. Uncle Alton never fired without killing. This was about the first time she had heard him blast away like that. Must be a bear, she thought excitedly, tripping over a root, sprawling, rolling to her feet again, without noticing the tumble. She'd love to have another bearskin in the room. Where would she put it? Maybe they could line it and she could have it for a blanket. Uncle Alton could sit on it and read to her in the evening. Oh, no, not with this trouble between him and Dad. Oh, if she could only do something. She tried to run faster, worried and anticipating, but she was out of breath and went more slowly instead. At the top of the rise by the edge of the woods, she stopped and looked back. Far down in the valley lay the South 30. She scanned it carefully, looking for her father. The new furrows and the old were sharply defined, and her keen eyes saw immediately that Corey had left the line with the cultivator and had angled the team over to the shade trees without finishing his row. That wasn't like him. She could see the team now, and Corey's pale blue denim was nowhere in sight. She giggled lightly to herself as she thought of the way she would fool her father, and a little sound of laughter drowned out for her the sound of Alton's hoarse dying scream. She reached across the path and slid through the brush beside it. The shots came up from around here somewhere. She stopped and listened several times, and then suddenly heard something coming toward her, fast. She ducked under cover, terrified, and a little baby-faced man in black, with blue eyes wide with horror, crashed blindly past her, the leather case he carried catching on the branches. It spun a moment, and then fell right in front of her. The man never missed it. Babe lay there for a long moment and then picked up the case and faded into the woods. Things were happening too fast for her. She wanted Uncle Alton, but she dared not call. She stopped again and strained her ears. Back towards the edge of the woods, she heard her father's voice, and another's, probably the man who had dropped the briefcase. She dared not go over there. Filled with enjoyable terror, she thought hard and snapped her fingers in triumph. She and Alton had played Injun many times up here. They had a whole repertoire of secret signals. She had practiced bird calls until she knew them better than the birds themselves. What would it be? Ah, Blue Jay. She threw back her head and by some youthful alchemy produced a nerve-shattering screech that had done justice to any jay that ever flew. She repeated it, and then twice more. The response was immediate. Call of a blue jay 4 times, space 2 and 2. Babe nodded to herself happily. That was the signal that they were to meet immediately at the place. The place was a hideout that he had discovered and shared with her, and not another soul knew of it, an angle of rock beside a stream not far away. It wasn't exactly a cave, but almost. Enough to be so entrancing. Babe trotted happily away towards the brook. She had just known that Uncle Alton would remember the call of the blue jay and what it had meant. In the tree that arched over Alton's scattered body perched a large jaybird, preening itself and shining in the sun. Quite unconscious of the presence of death, hardly noticing the babe's realistic cry, it screamed again 4 times, 2 and 2. It took Corey more than a moment to recover himself from what he had seen. He turned away from it and leaned weakly against the pine, panting. Alton. That was Alton lying there in heart. God, God, God! Gradually his strength returned, and he forced himself to turn again. Stepping carefully, he bent and picked up the .32-40. Its barrel was bright and clean, but the butt and stock were smeared with some kind of stinking rottenness. Where had he seen the stuff before? Somewhere. No matter. He cleaned it off absently, throwing the befouled bandana away afterwards. Through his mind ran Alton's words, was that only last night. I'm going to start tracking, and I'm going to keep tracking until I find the one that did the job on Kimbo. Corey searched shriekingly until he found Alton's box of shells. The box was wet and sticky. That made it better somehow. A bullet wet with Alton's blood was the right thing to use. He went a short distance, circled round till he found heavy footprints, then came back. I'm a-tracking for you, bud, he whispered thickly, and began. Through the brush he followed its wavering spoor, amazed at the amount of filthy mold about, gradually associating it with the thing that had killed his brother. There was nothing in the world for him to any more but hate and doggedness. Cursing himself for not getting Alton home last night, he followed the tracks to the edge of the woods. They led him to the big tree there, and there he saw something else. The footprints of the little city man. Nearby lay some tattered scraps of linen, and what was that? Another set of prints. Small ones. Small, stub-toed ones. Babe! No answer. The wind sighed. Somewhere a blue jay called. Babe stopped and turned when she heard her father's voice, faint with distant cursing. Listen at him holler, she crooned delightedly. Gee, he sounds mad. She sent a jaybird's call disrespectfully back to him and hurried to the plate. It consisted of a mammoth boulder beside the brook. Some upheaval in the glacial age had cleft it, cutting out a huge V-shaped chunk. The widest part of the cleft was at the water's edge, and the narrowest is hidden by bushes. It made a little ceilingless room, rough and uneven and full of potholes and cavelets inside, and yet was quite a level floor. The open end was at the water's edge. Babe parted the bushes and peered down the cleft. Uncle Alton, she called softly. There was no answer. Oh, well, he'd be along. She scrambled in and slid down to the floor. She loved it here. It was shaded and cool, and the chattering stream filled it with shifting golden lights and laughing gurgles. She called again, on principle, and then perched on an outcropping to wait. It was only then she realized that she was still carrying the little man's briefcase. She turned it over a couple times and then opened it. It was divided in the middle by a leather wall. On one side were a few papers and large yellow envelopes. On the other some sandwiches, a candy bar, and an apple. With the youngster's complacence, the acceptance of manna from heaven, Babe fell too. She saved one sandwich for Alton, mainly because she didn't like its highly spiced bologna. The rest made quite a feast. She was a little worried when Alton hadn't arrived, even after she had consumed the apple core. She got up and tried to skim some flat pebbles across the rolling brook, and she stood on her hands, and she tried to think of a story to tell herself, and she tried just waiting. Finally, in desperation, she turned again to the briefcase, took out the papers, curled up by the rocky wall, and began to read them. It was something to do, anyway. There was an old newspaper clipping that told about strange wills that people had left. An old lady had once left a lot of money to whoever would make the trip from Earth to the moon and back. Another had financed a home for cats whose masters and mistresses had died. A man left thousands of dollars to the first person who could solve a certain mathematical problem and prove his solution. But one item was blue pencil. It was, one of the strangest of wills still in force is that of Thaddeus M. Kirk, who died in 1920. It appears that he built an elaborate mausoleum and burial vault for all the remains of his family. He collected and removed caskets from all over the country to fill the designated niches. Kirk was the last of his line. There were no relatives when he died. His will stated that the mausoleum was to be kept in repair permanently, and that a certain sum was to be set aside as a reward for whoever could produce the body of his grandfather, Roger Kirk, whose niche was still empty. Anyone finding this body is eligible to receive a substantial fortune. Babe yawned vaguely over this, but kept on reading because there was nothing else to do. Next, there was a thick sheet of business correspondence, bearing the letterhead of a firm of lawyers. The body of it ran, In regards to your query regarding the will, Asadi is correct. We are authorized to state that his grandfather was a man of about 5 feet 5 inches whose left arm had been broken and had a triangular silver plate set into his skull. There is no information as to the whereabouts of his death. He disappeared and was declared legally dead after the lapse of 14 years. The amount of reward as stated in the will plus accrued interest now amounts to a fraction of over $62,000. This will be paid to anyone who produces the remains, providing that said remains answer descriptions kept in our private vaults. There was more, but Babe was bored. She went on to the little black notebook. There was nothing in it but penciled and highly abbreviated records of visits to the library, quotations from books with titles like History of Angelina and Tyler Counties, and Kirk Family History. Babe threw that aside too. Where could Uncle Alton be? She began to sing tunelessly. Tuna tuma ta, pretending to dance a minuet with flowing skirts like a girl she'd seen in the movies. The rustle of the bushes at the entrance to the place stopped her. She peeped upward, saw them being thrust aside. Quickly she ran to a tiny cul-de-sac in the rock wall, just big enough for her to hide in. She giggled at the thought of how surprised Uncle Alton would be when she jumped out at him. She heard the newcomer come shuffling down the steep slope of the crevice and land heavily on the floor. There was something about the sound. What was it? It occurred to her that though it was a hard job for a big man like Uncle Alton to get through the little opening in the bushes, she could hear no heavy breathing. She heard no breathing at all. Babe peered out in the main cave and squealed in utmost horror. Standing there was not Uncle Alton, but a massive caricature of a man, a huge thing like an irregular mud doll, clumsily made. It quivered, and parts of it glistened, and parts of it were dried and crumbled. Half of the lower left part of its face was gone, giving it a lopsided look. It had no perceptible mouth or nose, and its eyes were crooked, one higher than the other, both a dingy brown with no whites at all. It stood quite still looking at her, its only movement a steady, unalive quivering. It wondered about the queer little noise Babe had made. Babe crept far back against the little pocket of stone, her brain running around and round in tiny circles of agony. She opened her mouth to cry out and could not. Her eyes bulged and her face flamed with strangling effort, and the two golden ropes of her braided hair twitched and twitched as she hunted hopelessly for a way out. If only she were out in the open, or in the wedge-shaped half-cave where the thing was, or home in bed. The thing clumped toward her, expressionless, moving with a slow inevitability that was the sheer crux of horror. Babe lay wide-eyed and frozen, mounting pressure of terror stilling her lungs, making her heart shake the whole world. The monster came to the mouth of the little pocket, tried to walk to her, and was stopped by the sides. It was such a narrow little fissure, and it was all Babe could do to get in. The thing from the wood stood straining against the rock at its shoulders, pressing harder and harder to get to Babe. She sat up, slowly, so near the thing that its odor was almost thick enough to see, and a wild hope burst through her voiceless fear. It couldn't get in. It couldn't get in because it was too big. The substance of its feet spread slowly under the tremendous strain, and at its shoulder appeared a slight crack. It widened as the monster unfeelingly crushed itself against the rock, and suddenly a large piece of the shoulder came away, and the being twisted slushily 3 feet further in. It lay quietly with its muddy eyes fixed on her, and it brought one thick arm up and over its head and reached. Babe scrambled in the inch further she had believed impossible, and the filthy clubbed hand stroked down her back, leaving a trail of muck on the blue denim on the shorts she wore. The monster surged suddenly and lying full length now, gained at the last present inch. A black hand seized one of her braids, and for Babe the lights went out. When she came to, she was dangling by her hair from that same crusted paw. The thing held her high, so that her face and its featureless head were not more than a foot apart. It gazed at her with a mild curiosity in its eyes, and it swung her slowly back and forth. The agony of her pulled hair did what fear could not do, gave her a voice. She screamed. She opened her mouth and puffed up her powerful young lungs, and she sounded off. She held her throat in the position of the first scream, and her chest labored and pumped more air through the frozen scream. Shrill and monotonous and infinitely piercing, her scream. The thing did not mind. It held her as she was and watched. When it had learned all it could from this phenomena, it dropped her jarringly and looked around the half-cave, ignoring the stunned and huddled Babe. It reached over and picked up the leather briefcase and tore it twice across as if it were tissue. It saw the sandwich Babe had left, picked it up, crushed it, and dropped it. Babe opened her eyes, saw that she was free, and just as the thing turned back to her, she dove between its legs and out into the shallow pool in front of the rock, paddled across, and hit the other bank screaming. I'll bet. A vicious little light of fury burned in her. She picked up a grapefruit-sized stone and hurled it with all her frenzied might. Yeah, I kind of figured they'd come back. It flew low and fast and struck squashily on the monster's ankle. The thing was just taking a step towards the water, the stone caught it off balance, and its unpracticed equilibrium could not save it. It tottered for a long, silent moment at the edge and then splashed into the stream. Without a second look, Babe ran shrieking away. Corey Drew was following the little gobs of mold that somehow indicated the path of the murderer, and he was nearby when he first heard her scream. He broke into a run, dropped his shotgun, and holding the 32-40 ready to fire. He ran with such deadly panic in his heart that he ran right past the huge cleft rock and was 100 yards past it when she burst out through the pool and ran up the bank. He had to run hard and fast to catch her, because anything behind her was a faceless horror in a cave, and she was living for the one idea of getting away from there. He caught her in his arms and swung her to him, and she screamed on and on and on. Babe didn't see Corey at all, even when he held her and quieted her. The monster lay in the water, and neither liked nor disliked this new element. It rested on the bottom, its massive head a foot beneath the surface, and it curiously considered the fact that it had garnered. There was a little humming noise of Babe's voice that sent the monster questing into the cave. There was the black material of the briefcase that resisted so much more than green things when he tore at it. There was a little two-legged one who sang and brought him near, and who screamed when he came. There was this new cold-moving thing he had fallen into. It was washing his body away. That had never happened before. That was interesting. The monster decided to stay and observe this new thing. It felt no urge to save itself. It could only be curious. The brook came laughing down out of its spring, ran down from its source, beckoning to the sunbeams and embracing freshlets and helpful brooklet. It shouted and played with streaming little roots, and nudged the minnows and pollywogs about its tiny backwaters. It was a happy brook. When it came to the pool by the cloven rock, it found the monster there and plucked at it. It soaked the foul substances and smoothed and melted the molds, and the water below the thing eddied darkly with its fluted matter. It was a thorough brook. It washed all it touched persistently. Where it found filth, it removed filth, and there were layer on layer of foulness, then layer by layer of foul layer it was removed. It was a good brook. It did not mind the poison of the monster, but took it up and thinned it and spread it in the little rings round rocks downstream, and let it drift to the rootlets of water plants that they might grow greener and lovelier. And the monster melted. I'm smaller, the thing thought. That is interesting. I could not move now. And now this part of me which thinks is going too. It will stop in just a moment and drift away with the rest of the body. It will stop thinking, and I will stop being, and that too is a very interesting thing. So the monster melted and dirtied the water, and the water was clean again, washing and washing the skeleton that the monster had left. It was not very big, and there was a badly healed knot on the left arm. The sunlight flickered on the triangular silver plate set into the pale skull, and the skeleton was very clean now. The brook laughed about it for an age. They found the skeleton, 6 grim-lipped men who came to find a killer. No one had believed Babe when she told her story days later. It had to be days later because Babe had screamed for 7 hours without stopping, and had lain like a dead child for a day. No one believed her at all because her story was all about the bad fella, and they knew that the bad fellow was simply a thing that her father had made up to frighten her with. But it was through her that the skeleton was found, and so the men at the bank sent a check to the Drews for more money than they had ever dreamed about. It was old Roger Kirk, sure enough, that skeleton, though it was found 5 miles from where he had died, and sank into the forest floor where the hot molds builded around his skeleton and emerged a monster. So the Drews had a new barn and a fine new livestock, and they hired 4 men. But they didn't have Alton, and they didn't have Kimbo. And Babe screams at night and has grown very thin. And so sinks It, where mud births unrelenting doom, the seminal horror of existential dread and primal force. As the creature consumes, it echoes Hitchcock's pursuit of inescapable fate. North by Northwest blockbuster led to Psycho, 1960, shifting intimate shots, but his grand set pieces influenced 1960s cinema. Amid personal milestones like his 1960 U.S. citizenship, Hitchcock's thrillers define the decade. Anthologies like this preserve that monstrous vibe. Did this ooze unsettle you? Or did you think that the kid was gonna get killed? 'Cause I kinda did. Shame that the dog died. That's unfortunate. Pour one out for the dog. Comment your fears. Next, Casablanca by Thomas M. Dish? I'm gonna say Thomas M. Dish. And sorry, Thomas, if I fucked up your name. But that's Casablanca. Tread carefully. Like, subscribe, comment. Good night.
Typewriters dreaming all through the night. A smiling sun hangs on a cardboard sky, where the future got lost but never